Senator Elizabeth Warren, presidential candidate as well, of course, at South by Southwest, discussing her proposal to break up the technology giants such as Facebook or Alphabet or Amazon. With us now at Post 9, Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Times columnist Jim Stewart. Think that would be a good idea?
Well, look, I've always been a proponent of aggressive antitrust enforcement. But we have a set of laws and decades of judicial opinions that have done a pretty good job of policing and ensuring competition. To just come out and say, let's break up the big tech companies, why? What law here has been broken? What behavior have they done to either suppress competition through monopolization or through price fixing? I haven't seen the evidence. So let's put the laws aside for a moment and just see if in a utopian world would this be a good idea. I don't see what is the problem that is going to be addressed by breaking up the companies. Now, she said, oh, we want a level playing field. People can't compete with these big platforms. Well, who are these people?
Well, we may not know, Jim, because they don't want to innovate to compete with them because they can't get the funding, because anytime you go to a venture capitalist and say you're going to compete against Facebook, they're like, forget it. We're not giving you any money.
Well, you know, let's hear from some of these people. Again, I'm trying to be objective here, not just dismiss this out of hand, but I'd like to understand a little bit better what is the problem that we are addressing. And by the way, what are the benefits that we might be taking away by breaking them up? I mean, as far as I can tell, these companies have succeeded because people love what they produce. I mean, there's been an Amazon backlash recently, but people love using Amazon. It's convenient, it's cheaper, there's a benefit there. Google, people use the search engine because it produces the information that they want. What would our world be like today if we didn't have these innovations? And by the way, if innovators didn't have the financial incentives to produce them. I mean, the backbone of the antitrust laws have always been, you don't want to penalize, I remember this from law school, skill, foresight, industry, and innovation.
Right.
There is nothing illegal about becoming a monopolist because you're so good at what you do that others cannot compete against you. Now, she's comparing them to utilities where there is, one government-supported infrastructure. I think that's a stretch. There are perhaps natural monopolies in some of these areas, but with the rate of technological change, I don't even know if we can say that. I don't know that Facebook is entrenched forever. It came up quickly. There's been a lot of, turmoil in that world, a lot of, creative destruction, as the economists like to call it. I don't know that this is a perpetual monopoly by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, normally, I was going to say, utility normally is in exchange for the government granting you some kind of exclusive domain, right? Whether it's a territory or access to the, the spectrum or something like that. Although with Amazon, though, there have been people saying, look at how they deal with their third-party sellers. Are they actually competing, fairly against them? And, when you went after Microsoft, it was a bundling thing, but it wasn't really at the core of Microsoft's business that they were.
Yeah, well, look, I'm not giving them a pass on their behavior. They should be held to account and scrutinized. If there are individual actions that they take that are anti-competitive, we have the tools for addressing that. They should be investigated and held to account for that. But I would also say, if we look back in history, when the U.S. government decides to step in and break something up, what is the track record there? It is not very good.
Well, they succeeded in breaking up AT&T. I mean, it took a long time, but the modified final judgment,
and then it all moved right back together. I think most people now feel that whole thing was a fiasco.
Or a waste of time.
A complete waste of time and money. And it set the, telecommunications probably back decades, but ultimately technological change and competition completely undid
we don't
all
pay for
of
long distance anymore. We used to pay for long distance.
But that's not because they broke up the company.
But you can make an argument that the companies that resulted actually was a more competitive in some way playing field that gave rise to more innovation or brought more price competition, couldn't you?
Well, all I can say is they all ended up being folded right back in. AT&T today is bigger than it ever was back then.
Right. Well, it's not the AT&T that it was, because it really is Southwest Bell that is AT&T. We should make a point.
But another issue here is, is breaking up the companies, as I understand it, Warren has said, well, we're going to not let them own any of the companies that use their platforms. Like, I guess the biggest one would be YouTube and Google. So we're going to break that up. Well, that's classic vertical integration. And we've just, in the AT&T case, gone through an exhaustive
AT&T Time Warner.
Yes, review of vertical competition, vertical mergers, what's the impact on competition. And the remaining consensus, both legally and I think in the economics field, is that it's not anti-competitive to have these vertical arrangements. On the other hand, should anti-competitive behavior emerge in this vertical arena, then by all means, let's look at that and address it. But I don't see it yet. How is Google somehow preventing other people from gaining access?
Her other part of her argument is that people with good ideas sell their company to Google and Amazon. You don't hear arguments from people who are selling necessarily.
They're not complaining about it at all. And then the final thing I want to say, there's a whiff about all that. I mean, Elizabeth Warren is very smart. She's a Harvard Law School professor. She understands, I think, all of this. Is it, to some extent, just an attention-getting device, or is it plugging into this sort of broader trend, which is let's go after people who are rich and successful? There's then a whiff of all of this beginning to emerge in some of the Democratic platforms that I think bears monitoring. I think you're starting to see it show up in comments here and there that there's something about, well, they're just too rich and they're just too big.
But it's too powerful, too. It does go to market power, though, doesn't it, Jim? I mean, isn't that sort of the central theme here? Well, even if there is an antitrust law specific to attacking that?
Well, market power, it depends on how it's being used. I mean, why isn't she saying we should break up Coca-Cola or something? I mean, they've had a basic duopoly with Pepsi forever, and they have a very large market share. Do they have market power? Yes, they do have some market power. Is that bad? I don't think anyone feels they've abused it. The same thing here. If you have market power, we have existing laws that constrain how that can be used. If you're using the market power to suppress competition, to enhance your monopoly, then you can be prosecuted for it. And I'm all for vigorous enforcement of the antitrust laws.
Well, but thankfully we have the laws. Right. We have the laws. It worked. We had a president conceivably who wanted to have them apply the law in the case of AT&T Time Warner. Didn't succeed. I mean, the laws hold up.
Well, and this is how the system ought to work. It's, again, do we want the government regulating these platforms? Do we feel more comfortable with the government having the power to do this as opposed to independent profit-making companies who have to answer to shareholders and have to compete, who do not have the power of the government backing them up? I'd rather have the companies making these decisions about, for example, how search results appear on Google. Trump is complaining that the conservative results don't come up. Well, if the government, if he got control of it, would they all be, right-wing, or populist messages that come up on there? I don't think that's a good solution.